Sorry to interrupt. I've remembered his name. Richard Gardner.
Ah, I'll have to look him up.
Yeah. He's an American psychiatrist, if I've got that right. I think he's passed away now. But he was the one that came up with the parental alienation phrase, as I said. Now, what's interesting about the description, he actually described it as a syndrome, like a children's mental disorder, as well as being child abuse. So it does need clarity, absolutely, around this. But actually, one of the things that was a key phrase is it's not just a child not wanting to see an absent parent once you've separated, the non-residential parent. It's them not wanting to see them without reason. Now, what our Crown Prosecution Service guidelines now related to the Domestic Abuse Act amendments in 2021, including children, means that children are very much joined up with any domestic abuse. Somebody actually, I think it was Dr. Emma Catch, calls them co-victims, which I think is quite a good phrase to use. And because any child, and what this guideline says is that even if children don't, and this is not just physical violence, but even if children don't actively witness any physical violence, it still impacts them. And the likelihood of a domestic abuser also abusing the children is massive. I mean, I think I said to you before, I asked a friend of mine who's a psychologist, and I said, can the brain differentiate? Can you be a healthy, well-attached, stable parent whilst you're also abusing the other, to a child, whilst you're also abusing the other parent? Is that actually physically possible in the brain, for the brain to be able to differentiate in that way? She wasn't able to give me a succinct answer, but somebody out there might be able to. But the without reason is the key phrase, the key piece of language in there, because we know even when the abuser's been convicted of domestic abuse, even when they've been convicted, they are still allowed to push for contact with the child. And what that then does to the child is the child cannot trust anybody to keep them safe, not the state, not the law, not their healthy parent or their protective parent. And then we wonder why children get angry, or they act up, or they lash out, or they become, really angry. Something like that damages the relationship with the protective parent as well. But you have a child then who the message from everybody is, no matter what, your safety is irrelevant, and it's overridden by another adult's wants. And then we wonder why this goes on generation after generation after generation. Children have rights. They have rights, and they need to be actually upheld now, once and for all.
Exactly. I absolutely agree with faulting the parents in order to protect a child. As a child of divorce, I know what all of that looks like and feels like to the child. And there's so much that goes on in a child's head as far as loyalties to a parent, feeling unloved by a parent that isn't there or available. And you have to have somebody that's looking out for the child and being the adult for the child, um, rather than trying to assimilate. Uh, well, they'll be fine, and they're not,
They just
because they don't
witnessed
have
it.
right. Yeah,
No. I mean, where
and
is the logic? Just where is the logic in that? If you have abuse in a home, how can anybody else living in that home, let alone a child? The animals are impacted, let alone the children. But anybody, any other adults, anybody living in that home is impacted by it. So it's just, when you actually step back and look at the logic of this, how can that not be the case for children? They're not blind, they're not deaf, they're not dumb, they aren't devoid of feelings, they have intuition, they pick things up. You know, some of it is sort of quite surreal at times.
yeah, I mean, the reason I brought up parental alienation and was talking about it is because a parent that is abused and a child that is abused has a trauma response, and there is a part of the um, brain that's kind of shut off. And I'll kind of sum this up with, I was once in a store, and it was like a thrift store, and I watched a lady cold cock. She hit her child right in the face, right in front of me, knocked him into a clothes rack. And for a second there, I was like, did I just see what I thought I saw? Because I was uncertain of what I had seen.
Because it was so shocking.
It was so shocking to the system. So the woman took off down an aisle and was going out the door. And I turned to the child and helped kind of get out of the rack. And I said to her, "Are you all right? Did she just hit you? Are you all right?" And he looked at me and he said, I'm fine. And he went out the door, and I went to the counter and I said, somebody needs to call the police, because that lady just hit that kid. And for some reason, they didn't have a line out. I don't even know what that was about, but I went out, got her license plate number, called the police and said, you need to do a welfare check on this kid, because I just watched this kid get hit in the middle of that store. And we just don't know and believe. And so I think that, there has to be a lot more understanding to trauma and what happens with it. I can also share a little story about, well, that'll be for another day, but because we were talking about parental alienation, and I just feel like it's so complicated, because people have to understand anything to do with abuse is not going to fit in a normal relationship that is just not working out. So when a normal relationship just doesn't work out, the parents are like, well, how can we make little Johnny feel good about us not being together and understand that he is still loved? Because that is two parents coming together, adult parents coming together, deciding that they want to make sure that little Johnny is taken care of, and that he doesn't feel like he's being left by both parents. Both parents are watching out. You cannot, and our law is based on that. I think here in the States it is. You cannot have that if you have one parent that is like.
No, I mean you read this stuff about sort of like how to co-parent with an abuser or how to co-parent with a narcissist or whatever. Fact of the matter is, you can't co-parent with them. I think there's where did I read? I read something. Oh, there's all of these things, and I think it might be Dr. Emma Katz again. Again, a parallel parenting. So you can't co-parent with an abuser. It's about how do you manage to co-parent. But then we get back to this fundamental thing of, if somebody is an abuser, why is the child anywhere near them? Because if it was any other abusive adult to anybody, that child would be protected. And for some reason, and in our society, because it's either sperm or an egg, that this particular adult is the extra bit that they provided, somehow they are allowed to continue to abuse either the protective parent and the child, or just the child itself. It's I think sometimes we overcomplicate things. We need to get down to the nitty-gritty and I do like taking situations. If there's a situation I don't understand, or somebody's telling me something, I do like to transfer it out of domestic abuse into another scenario, because I think that really helps get a perspective. You just put it in another scenario, and it becomes clear that it's just that. Why would you have this? Why would you allow that? And it's literally any other person. So if you took another person, so bearing in mind that parents in law have a responsibility, a legal responsibility, to keep their children safe, to keep them well, to keep them happy, to keep them fed. So that is a legal responsibility of every single parent. And when you've got one parent who's trying to do that, the other parent is sabotaging them, trying for that to not happen. And that's where, all the psychological and financial keep bringing court cases or putting in false claims for things like land registry or other civil law things that I've gone and lost my thread now. See, it's getting all excitable. What was I talking about, Kat?
And I lost it. So
it'll come back.
That's just us. But
that's it. No. So responsibility, parental responsibility.
Right.
So if you took another adult, say a teacher or a doctor or even a childminder, or we can understand it with grandparents, we can understand it with aunts and uncles, that they have a responsibility for this child to be safe, well, and happy. But when it comes to quite often the father, also the mother, but it is more often than not the father, suddenly all of those societal and legal norms go out of the window. And why is that? Literally, why is that?
Right.
Because these patterns are also repeated. So these aren't one-off incidences. There will be a pattern to it, that it will be repeated again and again and again. So, it's like with most things with DA, once you know what you're looking for, it's so easy to see. But that's where we come in, doing something like this and bringing everybody in, like hopefully Bethany will come back on and other guests, whether that's people who can provide resources, or they have organisations, or
we've got people lined up. I think just starting with us. We're getting our thoughts out there and
seeing what people want
driving
to
our
hear
schedules.
about.
Yeah, because people don't understand it, and you bring up great points in responsibilities. I think about what I was thinking about when you were talking about that was family and the archaic kind of thought process that's out there about family, in that they're special. And I'm not saying that family's not special. That is not, but family, when an uncle is abusing you, it used to be uh, you just don't go around that uncle and you're not near that uncle at a gathering. And now we've gotten to a society that's like, well, we just don't go to some party or whatever with that uncle. If that uncle's around, we're not going to be there. We've made that clear. At the same time, what about what's going on at home between two parents? They break up. It's volatile in some fashion. People know on one side or the other that there's abuse going on. And why do we need to keep that contact up if that abuse is proven?
No, precisely.
So, I mean, I think if you've got that, or you've got a child that doesn't feel comfortable with one parent, but feels more comfortable with the other, and is old enough to be able to say that, then why not establish that child to be with that parent? And the other parent just has to deal with the fact that at this time, and try to be more adult about it.
Well, yeah.
Instead of continuing, that and having some education. We do have education here in Colorado that you have to go through on parenting, and I think it does help. It does help, but it doesn't answer the question of what's being done that's abusive.
Well, I think abuse across the board just seems to be becoming more and more and more normalised. I mean, rape in this country is effectively decriminalised. 1.6% of cases even making it to charge, reported cases, dropping down to 1.3, and only 6% of domestic abuse cases. It's the same. And it is about, I just feel really strongly it's about us as a society. If we can find a way as a society to decide what we want for our children and our grandchildren, what kind of society we want that to be. And I know I don't want I wouldn't want my grandchildren growing up where, in either, whether they were male or female, where things like rape and abuse were just the norm. But that's where we're heading to. It's extraordinary, the stuff that's going on in our schools and what our young people are suffering. But if you have children who are, and there are huge numbers of them, who have been told time and again, you don't matter and your abuser matters more than you, to the point where actually it's state condoned because we're going to force you to see them, that's child abuse in itself. It's horrendous. And it's no wonder. Not every child of abuse becomes an abuser. I will say that categorically. But there's no wonder that we have a faction of children who come from these relationships, who don't feel safe and who act out on it. That's their trauma response, is they just have to fight everybody because there's nobody they can trust, and they've been told they're not of any value, and they've been told they're never going to be safe. So,
And it just breaks my heart that anybody should have to grow up in that and not feel like they've got to, for a child not to feel like they have to watch their back because somebody's going to hurt them from a young age to an adult. Um, and, when you're involved in those situations, it doesn't just stop after the divorce. It doesn't just stop after um, the court cases are all lost. I mean, that's why we have what they call murder suicide, which is actually a result of domestic violence and abuse, or you have a perpetrator going in and killing a whole family.
Well, it's known that the separation is the most likely time you're going to be killed, or that's it rises because exponentially because they're losing control. But it's in Australia. There was also an really interesting piece calling for. It's actually linked to a modular housing company, a not-for-profit organisation, who are providing housing, and it's come out of a report that says that support. Often you've got the crisis, you've got the police, you've got all of that. The support is there. Then the minute the woman's left with their children, then that's it. That tends to be, she's then supporting a prosecution. But they're saying that actually it needs to be like 2 years to enable both the victim and all the victims, including the children, to be able to draw breath, to be able to access services, and to be able to rebuild their own stability. And that actually that's how long it needs, the minimum of how long it needs to be. And the recognition of children like being given preference for school places, like referring them to mental health, an automatic referral but not just like for mental health support, but for tailored mental health support, because of that conflict that they do feel at times, because their abuser is still their parent. But we know that from paedophilia, even when it's not their parent, even when it's a stranger, the brainwashing and the dissonance that goes on, where a child is told, oh, I love you if you do this, and yet that child knows that what they're being asked to do is wrong, but at the same time it's an adult that's telling them, actually you should be doing this, and I'll love you, and this is, it's proper tailored support. It would be great if this all happens, but the really sad thing is it shouldn't even need to be specified. We have our children's laws, we have the Children's Act, we have child abuse laws. So why should it even be a thing?
Well, and in that 2 years that you're talking about, you've got to think about it being perfectly okay during that whole 2 years in order for them to have some kind of stability. So when you have threats and court things happening and mind games that are happening that vary from phone calls, no phone calls, somebody just showing up, somebody telling somebody to tell somebody else something that gets back to all the different games that are played, right? Happening in those 2 years. So then they don't even have a base in those 2 years to be able to build that platform. So, you hear about people as kids having abuse at the home, leaving the home, going away for years, and coming back to that system to try to make amends and they still can't do it. And we're expecting children to do it without support of a society saying, that's wrong. So I brought up that movie earlier that I was watching. This kid had come in and he had taken out this whole family, and this little girl lived that was 11 years old. And they couldn't figure out who did this because they had nobody to hate them. They were just a really loved family. There was just nothing there. There was a man killed. No, there was a man who reported his gun stolen and ammunition stolen. And his son had stolen it and stolen his truck. And he killed somebody in that state, and then he left that state and he went after and killed these people. There were 4 children in that family, and 3 of them went away from the abuse that was there. Even the police wouldn't go up to this family's home because they were constantly hearing gunfire there, and they were all scared as a society to not go up. But there was children that were not being cared for, and then this kid lashed out. And here in the States, we're having a terrible problem with mass shootings, which is done mainly by white males in our society, who are lashing out. And I think you're brilliant in what you're saying as far as, if we have abuse going on, and we're not allowing Uncle John to come over because we know that he's a perpetrator of some kind of abuse, or Aunt Sue or whatever is mean, then why are we not talking about like parental alienation, which is language that is made up by somebody who doesn't even have the wherewithal to be making up such words for people to attach to, only to use and abuse more kids in our society.
It was a theory of his. It's not proven. It's not scientific. It was a theory. Fair enough, he's entitled to have a theory, but this is now being used in our courts of law, and it's not based in sort of real scientific multiple studies. It's not in any DMV book or anything. It's literally, I could have come up with that, with a certificate saying psychiatrist on my wall, so but like I say, there are 2 camps. Obviously you can tell which camp I'm in, but there are very much 2 camps in there. But what's happening as well is that it's causing division between victims because of the language around it. Like we've talked how we're going to have a big session on language, aren't we? We are going to have a it's just so important. And I'm pleased to see the police over here are starting, and other people in all kinds of elements are actually starting to really, really look at the language used around domestic and child abuses and what the implications of those are. The language is,
Right. I think they're starting to see in I think they know, there's a movie coming out I've talked to you about. And I think they know in courts and in police work, even though they're the ones that are, especially police, are using coercive control, they know when something is amiss. More in proportionate than they used to know. The education is always the key, right? But I think you bring up a great point in making it simplified instead of oversimplifying. And we have to be careful because there's trauma in there, and there's individualities, and there's religion, and there's culture, and there's all these things that we need to look to at the same time. But the child needs to be safe and nurtured and grown in our societies so that we can have good adults that are well balanced and taken care of. And not talking about it doesn't help anybody. And Sam and I do like to chat.
We do.
Here on our podcast, and so we hope to see you back soon. Take care. Love you, Sam.
Love you too. Take care.
Hello. Thank you for watching our channel today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for any new content, and find us on Patreon and your favorite podcasts. We hope we're one of them. Bye-bye.